We're moving into the last part of the course, and to start off, we're sort of summarizing where we've been so far, and then we're going to build on top of that and move on to some new concepts. So, theories of probability sort of steps back from what we've been doing so far and asks the question, how do you interpret probability statements? What do they mean? It splits into roughly two types, what are called belief type and frequency type. The names kind of indicate or are a bit self-explanatory. Belief type is about your beliefs. So probability statements are really reflections of one's confidence in a statement. Weathermen, when they give reports, Guy Hoggy is a good example, unfortunately somewhat abused, but perhaps not unjustifiably. His nickname Lie Hoggy. But what they miss there when they say his reports don't accurately reflect is that weather reporting is inherently unstable. We can't predict the weather. We can predict climate, which is different. Climate is the global system. Weather is local systems, and it fluctuates. So, like with going to Vegas, even though the house can predict in the long run what will happen, in the short run, they don't know on any particular night who will win and who will lose, right? Belief type reflects that inherent uncertainty. It's about your confidence in a statement, whereas frequency type is about that longer run. It concerns population, sort of like the house in Vegas. Okay? Belief type subdivides into two further types, what's called evidential probability statements and personal. Personal is just really just you, whatever you believe willy-nilly, right? It's not as simple as that, but you can think of that as a first pass. Evidential says, well, it's still about beliefs, but you need evidence to back that up. So you could have your beliefs. Somebody could be, say, a quack and say, my belief is you have cancer because of blah, blah, blah. And that's their personal belief, and they're just a nutcase. Whereas on the other side, someone could be a trained doctor, and a series of doctors who have done research, medical researchers, practitioners, and so forth, and they say, based on the evidence we got, here's our best beliefs about why you got cancer. We don't know for sure. That medicine's very complex, but here's what we think. One has evidence, the other one is reduced really just down to the personal element. I got examples there. You can read it. If any of you are interested, Trump is the real last name that Donald Trump had. The family's got a sort of sordid past history. And he believes that climate change is not real, and unfortunately, that just isn't the case. The so-called controversy over this is a false one. So if you want, usually charges of fake news, false media these days are themselves utterly false. So it's like we're awash in a sea of falseness built on top of falseness. If you ask climate scientists, they did a survey, over 99% around the world, more or less, say it's real and significantly due to human activities. There's a whole, even independent of that, there's a whole geologic era that we've entered called the Anthropocene, basically meaning that the shift is being brought about by our activities. If we have time, we'll get into this a bit later. The second probability type also has two kinds, what's called limiting frequency and propensity. Limiting frequency, you can think that's like tossing coins, and what happens in the long run, in an infinite run of tossing an ideal coin, gives you the ideal probability, so 50-50 represents that. Propensity has to do with powers or tendencies that are revealed over time. So smoking has a tendency to cause cancer, not in all cases. So if someone tells you that the probability of smoking causing cancer is 90%, well, what they're saying is there's inherent properties in nicotine and in the cigarette smoke, all that. They're both poisonous. You can't just say it's the smoke burning itself. They've done studies. Both of them are no good. Maybe it's the synergy between the two. I don't know the details of this, but the point is, it's known already, and the smoking industry knew this almost from the get-go, way back when, that there's a propensity, a tendency for smoking, the activity, with the smoke being burned, the material being burned, as well as nicotine to cause cancer. Incidentally, I should mention some of the same so-called scientists they hired by the tobacco industry to basically either deny or downplay or outright falsify the evidence for the link between smoking and cancer are some of the same people hired to deny or downplay or falsify the reality of climate change and our our effects on that. There's a bunch of interesting books on this. We might get to that also later in the course if we have time. So the difference is, you can think, well, let's just get to the diagram, and I'll sort of give you the monikers. Again, I assume you've read all this. So belief type is personal, it's all about you, or interpersonal, given evidence, I'm a team player. These are the key phrases indicating which one it is. Frequency type is the universe out there, the nature, as it were, has its own tendencies, and that those tendencies are shown. So when you interpret probability statements, you're really talking about the tendencies of the world to show certain things. Limiting frequency is about the long run, giving enough time, true probabilities of whatever it might be, say tossing a coin or rolling a die, it shows itself. Here's some examples. You guys can read that through as well. Via pictures. Here's the 4 founders for these interpretations, and you can think of their main idea is summarized. It's kind of interesting. It's sort of symbolically represented in pictures. So the first guy is Venn. He's the limiting frequency guy. Limiting frequency, again, is in the long run. Popper is the guy who came up with the propensity interpretation. There's a tendency expressed. D. Finetti is about personalist interpretation of probability, which, by the way, gets a lot of play in Vegas when you talk about odds for a certain team, and the way in which those odds change. Say if you're betting on the Super Bowl, what they do is they just aggregate the personal and then they add them up. We're not going to cover that chapter on betting. Unfortunately, we just don't have time in this course. If any of you are interested, you can check that on your own. And the reason for that is the real summary of the personal probability heads into Bayes, and that's Keynes. It looks like Keynes is pronounced Keynes, British guy. The evidence is what matters. He's not just the founder of this stuff, he's also one of the founders of one of the major interpretations in economics that gets a fair amount of play, although in today's day and age it kind of gets downplayed, but it seems to be making a partial comeback, but its ultimate fate is yet to be seen. Anyway, that's it for interpretations. We'll start applying this for the last half of the course, and each of these interpretations will be developed in full. So really this lecture is just mainly conceptual. You can check out some of the exercises at the end of the chapters to get some practice. The upcoming quizzes and homeworks will also get at that. So that's it. Welcome to the last part of the course.